Good morning, everyone. It's just a little afternoon. We're going to be having a special guest with us here shortly, Walter Stickle. We're going to be talking about eschatology. And we've touched on this before. We've touched on the fact Futurism to get people's mind off of Rome. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Also, we have Mark with us today. Can you say hi, Mark?
Hi.
And Mark will be sitting in a little bit with us today during the broadcast. Mark's been reading through Phillips versus the State of Missouri. Mark, I appreciate you doing that for me. It's kind of brought back some memories for me. I'm waiting for Walt to join us. I called him earlier from the restaurant, told him we were going to be a little late today. He said he'd be on at 12, so hopefully he will be joining us. Anyway, Joe Harper is got a channel called Truther Ministries on YouTube. Truther Ministries. You might want to check out his channel. I've enjoyed some of his videos. One of his best videos is on ancient Babylon, Mystery Babylon. It's a really good video. He also has done some other excellent videos as well. Did a really good video on the Trinity as well. But he has recently put out one on eschatology, and one of the things that we find is that there are numerous eschatological positions by different people. You have the premillennialist, you have the postmillennialist, the amillennialist, you have those that hold a historicist position, and so I tend to hold more of a historist position than anything. I still don't fully understand, to be honest with you, this millennium thing. I know the different people's position on the 1,000-year reign and all of that, but I pretty much like the pan-millennialist position. It's all going to pan out. I also pretty much take the position of Christ where he says, no man knoweth the day nor the hour. Now, he doesn't say no man knoweth the season or the general time frame of Christ's return, because he says when you see all these things come to pass, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. So anyway, I don't know where Walt is. I find it's getting more and more difficult for people to keep schedules in the days we're living in. I don't know why it's so difficult for Walt. He's retired, but anyway, I talked to him. He said he'd be there at 12 o'clock, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if he shows up. If not, we'll make this a short brief and then come back on. But anyway, I just think that Mark just finished reading this morning chapter 19. By the way, if any of you would like to get this book, Phillips versus the State of Missouri, I'll be happy to send you a PDF copy of it. That way you can follow along with Mark when he reads it. It's the account of my being 27 years ago terminated for refusing to license and place children with foster parents. I wrote the first book in 2000, and I think I wrote the first book in 2002, and then I felt like I needed a sequel to the book because so much of my understanding of the Bible has changed the last 7 years, so I wrote another updated version in 2017, and the chapters in the book, chapters, let's see, chapters 18 through 23 are the kind of the updated version of the book. The rest of it is pretty much the same. It just gives the account of the termination and the 5-year court battle with the state of Missouri over my wrongful termination, and we did win in federal court against the state of Missouri. With all the transgender stuff going on now, it's amazing how much people have, you know, gone into this whole scenario of, I guess I'll call Walt and see if I can get him on. I guess he wants a personal invite. I don't know. Anyway, see if I can get him on here. Yeah, we're on Facebook. All right. He acted surprised that here it is 9 minutes after 12. And he said he's going to come right on. So I don't know if he went to sleep or whatever. I don't know what happened. Anyway, we'll see if he jumps on here. Anyway, I've often said to people, you're better off if you stick with the facts instead of trying to read too much into the Bible. There's been a lot of people that have had their own interpretations. The Bible says that the Bible is not to be of any private interpretation. And it amazes to me how many private interpretations there are out there of the Bible. I pretty much take it literally. Now, I know there's some symbolism in the Bible, especially in Revelation, about, you know, men with all these different faces of a lion and different things. I don't understand all of that, I'll be honest with you. Here he is now, coming on board. Let me admit him into the circle here. Good morning, Walt. We're glad to have you joining us on Facebook Live. Our guests our visitors have been eagerly awaiting your appearance. So, anyway.
Okay.
I've kind of given an intro to what we're going to talk about. I've told them a little bit about Joe Harper and about how that he did a video on Mystery Babylon, and he'd also done one recently on eschatology, and you know how that the preterist eschatological position was really orchestrated by the Jesuits as well as the futurist position. And so I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and kind of what was it that really got your attention with that latest video by Joe Harper on eschatology?
Well, I like to kind of introduce Joe through his preface of his book, Lost Eschatology, Our Protestant Heritage Recovered, an introduction to historist postmillennialism. Well, what is kind of attracted me to Joe is you see, all the reformers to the man knew who the papacy was, and the more that you understand more to understand Reformation, the eschatology of it, Joe lays it out very simple. You know, the papacy is the Antichrist, and Roman Catholicism is Mystery Babylon, and one of the books that he uses as a source is Alexander Hislop. You know, the two Babylons, and I didn't really realize it that Alexander Hislop, you know, and why it's called the two Babylons. You see, because Rome is just a second Babylon, is the new Babylon, and it's so. Now this when you say this, we're saying this on a historical view. See, it's not that we're trying to pin something on Rome, but Rome's got all the credentials of ancient Rome. I would like to read. It's a real small preface of his book, you know, The Lost Eschatology by Joe Harper. And he says, this book is the result of my 9-year journey of studying eschatology. The Lord has given me a passion for history, which I've had ever since I was young. When I came to know the Lord personally, my interest in history logically led to a fascination with eschatology. Early on my Christian walk, I saw how the Bible's perfect description of history testifies to the fact that the Bible is truly the divine word of God. As I began to study eschatology, I found it exalting how the Bible perfectly prophesies the progression of a history thousands of years before certain events occurred. For example, I saw how the book of Daniel, which was written over 2,500 years ago, laid out an exact timeline for all of human history. I also saw the fascinating parallels between the books of Daniel and Revelation, which were written hundreds of years apart from one another. And I just like to comment. I like to comment here. You see, right after the Reformation, what made the Reformation really explode is when they pinned the tail on the donkey. You see, the Reformation brought us out of the Dark Ages, and of course, you know, I was raised Lutheran, didn't hear a peep about this history, not a peep. I mean, I as a young man growing up, I realized there was a little stigma between Catholicism and Lutheran, but I had no idea what it was about. And sometimes I always say they haven't rewritten history; they've just left big portions of history out. Now that was the first paragraph. I thought Joe, in this his preface of the book, it lays it out very clear where he's going in his book. He says, back to Joe's book now, my views on eschatology have been shaped gradually over the years. Early on in my studies, I discovered the view called historicism. This view said that the Bible prophecy describes literally historical events, and that the book of Revelation is a timeline of church history. This view seemed, in my mind, to reflect the fact that the Bible perfectly describes historical events long before they actually happened. As I continued to study, I discovered that this view of Bible prophecy was once the dominant understanding of eschatology for hundreds of years. It seems strange to me how a view once almost universally held to by theologians had now become so rarely believed today. Because we live. You see, Larry and I have, and my website, the Grand Design Exposed, I should say, is a good place to find, this country. The founding fathers of this country were Babylonians, and that's a big statement to make. But
how would you answer someone, Walt, that would say that anyone that comes against our founding fathers are liberals?
Well, that's an interesting question.
How would you respond to that?
That's an interesting question.
Because I've gotten that a lot. People say anybody that takes a stand against the founding fathers of our country is a flaming liberal. Stop.
Well, it exposes. They're actually exposing themselves because they have the missing link to the American Revolution. The American Revolution was not about tea and taxes. It was about religion. And three of the founding fathers, they call them fathers, and that calling our founding fathers is paganism. And I'm not going to stop and go there, but Jim Brown of Truth and Grace Ministries covers it. I've heard him cover it. It's part of Mystery Babylon. It's paganism. But getting back to your question, three key founders were not ever mentioned. If you go to my website, and I have 40 buttons, and one of those buttons is the Catholic founding fathers. And by the way, if you do a Google search on Catholic founding fathers, you will come to these three men. These three men that are left out of all the history books. You won't see their names in any public schools. They're not mentioned publicly. And they are Charles Carroll, Daniel Carroll, and John Carroll. And Charles Carroll, I heard a quote from John Adams. He was the wealthiest man in the colonies, and he had the most slaves. He had over 400 slaves, and he didn't live that far away from George Washington. And in getting back to the question, you see, the reason why is because people don't know the motive for the American Revolution. The American Revolution, the motive was to give Catholics civil and religious rights, because up until 1776, the Roman Catholics couldn't build churches, and they couldn't say Mass in public. Of course, they came over here in 2008. The Pope came over here to see George Bush Jr. And after he visited the Pope, he went to New York City and filled Yankee Stadium, and they had a Mass. See, and of course, the whole visit of the Pope, nobody realized, but they were celebrating the liberation of civil rights and religious rights in America, and to celebrate, they had a Mass. A standing in the Husky Stadium was not Husky Stadium. I want to keep saying Husky Stadium, but that's Washington State. But the Yankee Stadium, they had a Mass, and they only standing room only, and lined up outside. But again, I want to go back. The reason why because nobody they don't talk about it. They never share to the general public because we as Americans have not been educated. We haven't been given our true formation, the motive for the American Revolution. It was to give equal rights, religious rights, to Roman Catholics. Before the Constitution, they had none. There was less than 1% of the population were Roman Catholic. They were the smallest denomination in the colonies, and they had to go underground. And all this information, now you will find it on Catholic education sites. If you go to the founding fathers, Catholic founding fathers, you will find that everything I'm saying is explained by Catholics, not Protestants, because even the word Protestant, it's called Protestant. That isn't the way you pronounce that word. It's Protestant. And what were they protesting? When you hear the word Protestant, it's Protestant. Time understood who the papacy was. The papacy says that the Antichrist is out in the future, and the preterist, he says it's already happened. It's already happened. And those two doctrines, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue. I should have had it, but it's in Joe's book. He tells you the Jesuits that created these two doctrines, and see what these two doctrines cover up is the Futurism, the Antichrist is coming in the future, and Preterism, it's already happened, it's past. So
was it Ribera?
So it's a free ride.
Was it Ribera, possibly? The Jesuit?
Well, it's in his book.
Okay.
Joe Harper's book.
And you got a copy. You got that book. How many pages is that book, and where can people get that book if they want to pick it up?
It's 274 pages. Yeah, and this is basically I'll kind of give you the index, the table of contents.
Before you do that, where can they get the book? Do they just go to Truth or Reform website, and then you can order it from there, from Joe's website?
All you have to do is Lost Eschatology, Our Protestant Heritage Recovered. Joe Harper, spelled Harper is Harper, and it'll take you. I got my copy from Amazon.
Okay.
Not that I'm trying to, see, the first chapter is the lost view. The introduction is the lost view of eschatology, and chapter 1 is eschatological positions. And see, the three positions that is historicism, preterism, and futurism. And he explains historicism. See, and chapter 2 is the last days. Chapter 3 is the great timeline, Daniel 2. And chapter 4 is the Antichrist. Chapter 5 is the conversion of the Jews. And chapter 6 is the Olivet Discord. Because, see, the preterism, there is even parts of preterism that believe that Christ actually came back. He made Christ came back in 70 AD. And I will just say this, it's part of the lost eschatology, because that covers up,
and by the way, we're not 70 AD deniers. What I mean by that is
absolutely.
Christ made certain prophecies that were going to happen in 70 AD. One of the things he said is that the temple would be destroyed, and not one stone would be left standing on another, and that happened. But even though we proclaim the reality of 70 AD, that wasn't the end of the world in 70 AD. There's a lot that's happened since 70 AD, and that's what we're trying to point out, is that the preterists, the full-blown preterists, deny the prophetic relevance of the book of Revelation. They also deny the prophetic relevance of large portions of Matthew 24 and the parallel gospel chapters that talk about the very end times that we're living in today, as it was in the days of Noah. I didn't mean to interrupt, Walt. I just thought I'd throw that in.
No, well, and Joe goes, the Oliver Discourse, Matthew 24, he has a whole chapter on that. He goes over verse by verse. And briefly, I want to comment, preterism and futurism is a doctrine of the Jesuits. And people want to believe preterism. They're believing Jesuit doctrine. And he'll tell you, he tells you the history of it, and he'll tell you the Jesuit that created preterism and futurism. And but I want to get back to the little preface. There's a small preface. I've read a couple paragraphs. I want to get back to it. He says in the, I just want to recap the last paragraph that I said. It seems strange to me how a view once almost universally held by theologians had now become so rarely believed today. In other words, when you understand, when you understand what the Jesuits teach, you'll understand why in 2015 we had a Jesuit Pope come to speak to a joint session of Congress. Now, Walt's not making this stuff up. This happened. Now, this is history. And in other words, what I just said there, we had the Antichrist come to speak to a joint session of Congress. That's what Martin Luther would say. That's what John Calvin would say, and the Reformers. The Antichrist spoke on September 24th, 2015. And he got 29 standing ovations. Kind of takes my breath away to say.
Yeah, and we also have to we have to remind ourselves that this was all brought about. Why did the Jesuit brothers, the Carrolls, John and Dan Carroll and Charles Carroll, why did these people have such an interest in the United States and in bringing in this, affirming the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal and the separation of church and state? Was to bring in Catholicism. It was an answer of Ignatius Loyola's Counter-Reformation. This is all about counter-reformation. Walt mentioned the Dark Ages. Well, the Dark Ages, the Reformation brought light in the midst of darkness. It shed the light of the gospel to the common man. And as a result of that, Ignatius Loyola brought about a counter-reformation, which was the Jesuits. And now we have the Jesuits that have been instrumental in these two doctrines of Preterism and Futurism, as well as in influencing through Darby, Charles Nelson Darby, the secret rapture. And all of these have at their foundational core Jesuit influence. So this is a result of the counter-reformation activities of Rome.
Yes. Getting back to Joe's book now, I'm going to, because he says, quote, this is from Joe Harper, the understanding of historicism has deepened over the years. As I begun to buy books on historicism and read them, I more and more saw it as a comprehensive eschatological system, integrally connected to the other branches of systematic theology. The various topics of eschatology, such as the Antichrist, the conversion of the Jews, the millennium of the kingdom of God, and the new covenant, all relate to each other, and also to countless other theological themes. I have also found immense encouragement as I have studied eschatology. This has always been true for me, but become more profoundly so when I came to post-millennium convictions. When I saw God's promise for the church, I was filled with hope and optimism. The encouragement of the promises has been a great blessing to my soul amidst the trials of Christian life. In our day, it seems that the world is progressively getting worse, which makes the promise of the church's latter-day glory a most blessed of truths. I hope that this book will be of some help for the believers as they study eschatology. It is my earnest desire that other believers will discover the same encouragement that I have found from studying God's plan for the end of the history. Although this book may not answer every question people have over the view of eschatology, I am laying it out. It is my intention that this book may serve as a first step for those hoping to understand historic postmillennialism. And I have to say that you see everything, not everything, but this lost eschatology, I've been aware of it. In other words, just like the founding of America, the real intentions for the American revolutions, like I said, was not about tea and taxes. It was about religion, and I think we're seeing the fruit of the revolution in the days that we live, because the Roman Catholic Church was the smallest denominations. It couldn't even practice in public. And another thing, Roman Catholics couldn't hold office.
Well, I just want to say for our listeners that, Richard Bennett held a historicist position. Now, I don't know if he would have called himself a historist, post-millennialist or not, but he was a historicist. I favor the historist position. Now, I wouldn't go so far to call myself a historist post-millennialist. And I think that, like I said earlier before Walt came on, I'm a pan-millennialist. I believe it's all going to pan out, and I believe that Christ said, "No man knoweth the day nor the hour," and so we might know the seasons of his coming, but we don't know the exact time of his coming. But I do, even though I've struggled with this myself and it's been a long study, I think that Joe Harper makes a lot of sense, and I'm looking forward to eventually getting a copy of that book myself and reading it. He has a video on the same subject on his channel called Reformed Eschatology, Lost Reformed Eschatology. And I still have questions, Walt. I still have questions. We all do, but I think this does give some answers to especially the big questions, which is Preterism and Futurism, that they're both Jesuit inspired.
Absolutely. I wanted to close with this. Remember what I said before, that Roman Catholicism was the smallest representative in the 13 colonies. Today, it's the largest. There's 28 Jesuit universities, 244 Catholic higher learning, 50 Jesuit high schools, and also in my book, The Vatican Jesuit Global, Book 2, I have a chapter written by P.D. Stewart on code word Babylon, and on his 31st in this book, I have about 8 or 9 different authors and they're all giving some of the eschatology, or the bio of the American Revolution, and the one that P.D. Stewart's book, in P.D. Stewart's book, and see, I have Tupper Saucy. I have the first 2 chapters of Tupper Saucy in the book Rulers of Evil. That's in this book also. And I have Chris Pinto. And I have Michael de Semblin. I have a chapter on the Jesuits. But chapter 31 of Code Word Babylon by P.D. Stewart is how America became a Jesuit enclave. There's no other country in this world that's got 28 Jesuit universities. This country is part of the papacy. The papacy controls this country. We're their army. We're fighting papal wars. All these wars. When I start talking like this, there's so much evidence. Dwight D. Eisenhower hit. Who was the commander of the Allies in World War II? His handler, I might say was Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service of Georgetown University. Now, if you go to my home page, everything that I'm saying is documented. And there's a picture on the front page of my granddesignexposed.com. And the thing of it is, if you don't know a little history, this don't mean nothing to you. Just go by it and you say, well, who's Edmund Walsh? Well, there's a picture of Eisenhower, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, with Father Edward Bunn at Georgetown University, D.C., unveiling a bust of Reverend Edmund A. Walsh, October 1958. And see, I have a little caption by the. I have a source link. And you can look up. You know, that was the war. Georgetown University was the war room for World War II. Before you read this page, please understand my motive for sharing this historical article about Dwight D. Eisenhower and Jesuit Edmund A. Walsh of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. I think you will find it very interesting. Edmund Walsh had been to Russia. He had meetings with Lenin. He was at Nuremberg, the trials where they tried the National Socialists for war crimes. There's a picture of him over at in Tokyo with MacArthur. I mean, Edmund Walsh was just what he represented. The School of Foreign Service of Georgetown University. And I have a speech that Eisenhower give. I have the speech when he was invited to Georgetown University. And then also on my front page, I've watched it 2 or 3 times. It's a big picture, and it's a link to a video. Who controls the U.S. government? The Devil's Playground, Jesuit Georgetown University. Now it's worth watching. I mean, in other words, Clinton's been there. Hillary. Just a list of the people that have been invited to speak at Georgetown University. Georgetown University, and remember, it was founded by John Carroll. And he was the first archdiocese. To begin with, after we became a nation, there was 5 archdioceses, and now there's well over 300 across the United States. The United States is carved up into territories, into archdioceses. There's 2 here in Oregon. There's 2 in Washington, and there's about, I think there's 7 or 9 in California. But the archdiocese, is really the shadow government of the United States. That's when people talk about the shadow government, they never mention who it is. To control it, to create revolutions, you have to infiltrate education. And these 28 Jesuit universities in the United States are renowned universities. I mean, not everybody gets to go. I mean, it's the cream of the crop that go to the not just Catholics go to Georgetown University or these Jesuit universities, but anyway.
Well,
it's worth watching.
It's interesting. We've been going about 45 minutes. I want to kind of bring this to a conclusion. I want to remind everyone that obviously, like we said this morning as Mark was reading through Phillips versus the state of Missouri, that God has ordained all of these things that are happening in our world, including the Reformation, including the Jesuits and Counter-Reformation and everything. God is behind it all. Sometimes it's hard for us to understand how that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and those that are called according to His purpose. But God knows all things. We don't know all things. So I appreciate Walt coming on today and further exploring Joe Harper and his work. I applaud Joe Harper for what he's doing. And Joe Harper did a really good video on the Trinity. I would recommend if people reading that or watching that video. Also, I would like to extend to Joe Harper, if he hears this, we would love to have you as a guest sometime to come on Facebook Live with us and discuss some of your materials. But I do think that one of the best resources out there on the Roman Catholic Church has got to be Walt's website. He's put many years into the development of that website. It's granddesignexposed.com. There's a plethora of materials on there available, and then you can also get the two books that Walt's put together, Book 1 and Book 2 of the Jesuit Global Conspiracy, and Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy, Books 1 and 2, which are full of information, and multiple authors are involved in those books. And also I would recommend that you check out the materials that are available through the Gospel Missions website. They've got some really excellent books on there that you can go and get. And there's also so many different resources available to validate what we're saying in regards to the Founding Fathers. A lot of people try to excuse away and say, well, some of the Founding Fathers were deists. No, I would go much further than that. Thomas Jefferson wrote his own Bible. He took the miracles of Christ out. He took the virgin birth out. Benjamin Franklin was an avowed occultist. They found many skeletons and bones in his basement. John Adams was a deist all the way. He was a Unitarian, and of course we know all about the atheist. What was his name? Thomas Paine was a avowed atheist. He was the furthest thing from a Christian. And then we have the Carroll family, and Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. George Washington was a Mason. You can see his statue in the Masonic Library in Washington, D.C., in the Masonic Museum. So these people were the furthest thing from Christian. Anyway, any closing thoughts before we wind this up today, Walt?
Well, in this day and age, there's things I'd like to say, but I will say this: if you go up to my website, just look at the evidence and you draw your own conclusions. I mean, I could bring up things, but it overwhelms me when I put all that evidence. I've asked Larry several times, is there anything up there that I should take down? And when I came across the United States and visited Larry, I give all my books away except a few. And one of them I pulled, and I said, I'm going to give this book to Larry. And it was The Ark and the Dove by I can't. What was that author's name, Larry, that wrote Ark and the Dove?
I've forgotten right now. I'm going to have Rosette see if she can pull that book up.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
Ark and the Dove it's written by a Roman Catholic historian. It's not written with the Protestant viewpoint. And they tell you right in the book their plans for America. The book's divided up into 3 stages. And anyway, I give that book to Larry one night, and I turned in for the night, and when I woke the next morning, Larry knew what that was in that book. I mean, and Tom Fress of Inquisition Update, you can go up to his site. Tom Fress wrote that. He's read that book on his website, so you can. That's the book.
J. Moss Ives.
J. Moss Ives.
Here's
yes.
the copy of the book, The Ark and the Dove, and one of the things that struck me.
That's a hard book to get a hold of too.
Yeah.
Very hard book.
The thing that struck me about the book as I was reading through it, more than anything else, was the influence of the Jesuits coming over to the United States as missionaries, and from the onset, and how that it was, just to read you the chapters. The English mission field. This is in the light of the Jesuits, right? The English mission field.
Right.
Early attempts at Catholic migration. And it talks about George Calvert, the first Lord Baltimore. And the Jesuits saw America as the promised land. And chapter 7 is the first Lord Baltimore and the Jesuits. And it also talks about the religious liberty and how it was affected in favor of the Catholics. And then guess what? Book 2 is titled The Planting. First we have the preparations, then we have the planting, then we have the harvest in book 3. The harvest of the Jesuit mission field. The harvest was Charles Carroll and Preparing for Independence and John Carroll. This was the harvest. This was bringing everything into fruition. So it is I'm showing you the book now, The Ark and the Dove. This book was given to me by Walt Stickles sometime. By the way, you can go to sermonaudio.com/house church, and I have done a couple different sermons on the Ark and the Dove. You're welcome to go and listen to those. But it's a wake-up call for us today with what's going on within the... By the way, not only the United States is being influenced by the papacy and the Antichrist, but all over the world. The Roman Catholic Church has over 2.1 billion with a B members throughout the world. Most of South America is under Jesuitical Roman Catholic influence, as well as many, many other parts of the world. So
North America too.
Yeah.
North America, Europe. They have their influence all over the world.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I call the book The Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy. We can see right now in the world that there is a move for global government, and
even though we don't believe that the world is a globe, just so people know, we don't believe it's a globe. We believe it's a plane, and we believe that the Earth is fixed, it's stationary, it does not move. We believe that there is also a connection between secular education and Jesuit education. In other words, you can go back to, and by the way, Joe Harper is a biblical cosmologist as well. He has many videos exposing the lies of heliocentrism and the fact that we're not spinning through Earth at 1,000 miles an hour. I don't want to get off on that, but Joe Harper has it right on that subject as well. In fact, he just had one talking about migration on the voyages coming. They'll try to say, well, it has to be a globe because you end up at the same place you start. And I thought he did a real good job of covering that. All you have to do is look at a compass, and you'll get an idea about how a ship migrates and ends up in the same place. We didn't say that the Earth was not a circuit. We did not say the Earth was not round, but it's not a globe. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to bring this to a conclusion. Go ahead, Walt.
One thing to get to his YouTube, it's Reformed Truth Ministries. We'll take you there.
Yeah, isn't it Reformed Truther? Truther, isn't it? Truther.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah.
Truther Ministries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
And
It's a
and
good
he
channel,
has
and I haven't
really-
really seen anything on his channel that I would take opposition to. Now, I like a lot of what Jim Brown teaches on Grace and Truth Ministries, but I don't agree with his coming against the King James Version of the Bible like he does. I disagree with that. So, anyway, that's pretty much all I have on my mind today. Walt, any final thoughts?
No, that's we better cut this short here. Better off.
All right. We've gone 55 minutes and 6 seconds, so we'll plan on being with you next Friday. God bless.
Okay. Bye for now. God bless.